Welcome back to MidPoint, everybody. We have been following all day long what has been happening in Ferguson, Missouri after the grand jury indictment, failure to indict, I should say, last night. We, of course, have been watching the various press conferences and what has been happening. We want to take a moment here and just sort of pull everything back down for a moment, because in all of this and all the various coverages that we have seen and a lot of the interviews that we are doing, we continue to hear a lot of opinions based on what we heard, what we didn't hear, and what we supposedly wanted to hear in so many ways. What is happening now is the city is still trying to put itself back together. The police are trying to make sure that they get some kind of order in Ferguson. We have had no other reports of any sort of violence at this time. But again, it is coming down to another evening in Ferguson, Missouri, and there are still so many questions as to why this decision came out as it did, why there was no police protection, and of course we have seen the Reverend Al Sharpton and others today who have had their say about the lack of an indictment. Now we need to turn to something that is, and someone who knows fully well what it is like in these trying circumstances, to try and bring everybody together. Because we want to welcome back to MidPoint one who grew up learning the messages from a gentleman named Dr. Martin Luther King. His niece, Alveda King, joins us today. Dr. King, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, and thank you for letting me speak to you during these troubled times, but I'm praying that hope will yet arise.
Let me ask you first and foremost, because I'm sure you, like everybody else, watched the grand jury proceeding, the result that came out last night. From what you have seen, do you feel justice was done?
I had just left St. Louis a few hours before that time of the decision. I had been with preachers and leaders and people praying all that night before. I believe that human justice, of course, has been realized by a grand jury of peers of Michael Brown and Darren Wilson. Black jurors, white jurors, I guess blended in age and gender and all of that. So a jury of peers appears to have decided that there was going to be some reasonable doubt based on everything that they had heard. So that was not a racist decision. I mean, if you can admit that there were black folks and white folks on that grand jury, it's not a racist decision.
How then do we as a people, you, me, and others, try to get this past the point of it being a conspiracy, a fix, a racial incident where people who will say, and Reverend Sharpton and so many others, the attorneys have all said that this is a racial issue. How do we get past it?
Well, you know, I'm sitting here, and as I told you, I'm reading 1 Peter 3:9 in the Bible. Don't repay evil for evil. Don't retaliate with insults when people insult you. Instead, pay them back with a blessing. Now, there's a mitigating conversation, and that I don't understand it. And Reverend Sharpton still won't answer this, even though he lives in Chicago. Okay, when a white officer shoots a black person, that's racism. When it's black on black crime, what is it? They won't answer that. So we're one human race anyway. Everybody has one blood, and we can get transfusions no matter what our skin color is. My daddy, A.D. King, told me I can't hate white people when my uncle was killed. I said, I want to blame somebody. He said, you know, white people march with us, pray with us, die with us. You can't hate white people, you see. So I don't think Reverend Sharpton remembers that when he thinks back to my daddy being beat up on that Selma Bridge along with the white folks. I don't think he remembers that.
I know that you're not a person who hates, so I'm not going to ask if you hate it, but certainly when you see Al Sharpton standing there, and he is the face of what goes on in Ferguson at this point, how dismayed are you as an African American?
I'm so dismayed because God is love. Martin Luther King Jr. promoted love. My daddy, A.D. King, did. They gave their lives for the love of a beloved community and the love of God. And so to divide like that, and you know, you can go in and stir up violence and then say you're the solution to the violence. Well, if you're going to stir it up, how are you going to solve it? I don't get that one. I don't understand.
Dr. King, I'm going to ask you to stand by for just a couple minutes. We have to take a break because I want to come back, talk to you a little bit more, not only about what happened, but certainly about some of the lessons of history. So please hold on with us just a few moments. Stay with us here on MidPoint. When we come back, Dr. Alveda King, we are going to look back a little into history here and perhaps see why we're failing to learn some certain lessons. It's coming up right here on MidPoint.
I think if we can keep the struggle moving in a path that leads to progress. In other words, if we can win concrete victories as we have in the past through nonviolence, if we can say and if we can show people that we are gaining something by following this course, they will continue. I do not approve of violence, whether it is perpetrated by racists or whether it's perpetrated by Negroes. I think it's both impractical and immoral in our struggle.
Welcome back to MidPoint, everybody, and once again, let us welcome back the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Alveda King joins us. Dr. King, with those words that your uncle spoke so many times, he talked about nonviolence. Who is it that hijacked his message that to this day in the black community and any community does not allow for people to understand that if you want to get something done, you don't have to loot, burn, scream, or kill?
I'm sitting here looking at also a quote from my uncle when he won the Nobel Peace Prize, and he, similar to what you just played, after contemplation, I conclude that this award, which I received on behalf of that movement, is a profound recognition that nonviolence is the answer to the crucial political and moral questions of our time. The need for man to overcome oppression and violence without resorting to violence and oppression. My father, in his comments, he went over with his brother and his family to receive that award, as Uncle Emil was awarded. My dad said, Martin Luther King Jr. is a symbol of a movement that holds peace and agape love at its core. May this Nobel Peace Prize honor his sacrifice and humility and ever remind us of what can only be achieved through faith and God's grace. That's what we're leaving out, and that's what I'm sorry to call them wolves in sheep's clothing, but to me, that's what we're looking at. And so to stir up violence and to say no justice, no peace, when Michael Brown's own parents are saying, let's have peace and justice. Let's resolve this peacefully. Let's get solutions. The best way to honor Michael Brown is honestly to agree with his parents.
Then if you look at what is being said, and I know you're talking about the wolves in sheep's clothing, we know who you're talking about here. The people, again, like Al Sharpton, like Jesse Jackson, these are the people who consistently push this message forward, not of violence, but what pushes people to believe that violence is the right way. So then how do we stop the evil? How do you shut it down? Nothing seems to have worked at this point in our society.
Will you let me speak to Reverend Sharpton and Reverend Jackson right now? And I hope someone hears this and tell them that Alveda loves them, is praying for them, and said this. When you stir up people's emotions, they are not going to function from a place of calmness and reason. Emotional feelings can incite violence. I'm just asking them to remember that. I'm not saying necessarily that they on purpose want people to be violent and kill people. I'm not saying that. But when you stir up people's emotions, rather than invite them to their knees in prayer, you are more likely to get violence. Can you make sure they hear this? I don't know how. Somebody on Twitter or Facebook, just tell them I made that appeal today.
Has Reverend Sharpton ever taken you up on one of your offers to speak face-to-face about this?
I see Reverend Sharpton often. I still have a picture in my phone with he and my cousin Martin when we were in Washington, D.C., for the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act, I think, or the statue being dedicated. I see him often enough, and Reverend Jackson as well. And honestly, I don't hate them. I pray for them, just like I pray for President Obama. This takes prayer. Hate is not going to answer. You know, that old song, I don't remember, only love, war is not the answer, only love can conquer hate. So hating is not going to solve anything. So I won't go to a hate mode. I'll go to a love and prayer mode.
I knew that's exactly what you would say as well, because I know your teachings all too well. Dr. Alveda King, I want to thank you for taking a couple of minutes to join us. I know that you're busy and on the run today. Please, sometime soon, we'll get you in front of a camera sometime, and let's continue this discussion.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
All right, Dr. King. Thank you so much, Dr. Alveda King. Next hour here on MidPoint, Jane Velez Mitchell weighs in on the media coverage from Ferguson, another delay from the Iranian government, and the money master. That and so much more as we continue right here on MidPoint.